Thanks for watching the video. So we're going to be making some Impressionist art here, and we're going to be using oil pastels. The Impressionists lived in the late 1800s, and it kind of got started by a couple different people. Manet and Monet, you could argue both had a little bit to do with it. So I search for Impressionist art on the internet, and when you're doing that, you might find a whole bunch of different stuff. Artists could be Monet, Renoir, Manet, Pissarro, Degas, Mary Cassatt, and a bunch of others. I picked an image called Flowers in a Vase by Pierre-Auguste Renoir, and I am going to use that for the basis of my drawing. It's always going to be right in front of me as I'm working on it, and I'm constantly referencing it. So I started here with a pencil, and I want to draw it pretty lightly. In fact, I'm going to draw it out lightly, and then I'm going to erase it. So all I really see is just the faint lines of what was there, so that this does two things for me. It makes it if I make any mistakes while I'm doing this part, I can easily fix it. And then once it's finished, it's going to give me a nice layout for where I'm going to go with the oil pastels, since they will not be forgiving if I make a mistake. So I want to make sure I kind of have stuff where I want them to be before I get to that point. So as I said, I erase that and then kind of go on to the oil pastel part here. Again, I'm going to be constantly looking at the image that was already in front of me. I start out by outlining everything roughly where they're going to be with the lightest color that it could be. The thing about Impressionist art is that it's not super clear. It's not, they don't get into the fine details. And in fact, if you look closely at the one at this painting, yeah, you can see there's just very broad brush strokes. He mixed a little bit of paint in areas and then tried to capture that flower, and probably did it in a very quick manner. In fact, I imagine it's going to take me longer to make this than it took Renoir to finish this painting in the first place. Once I get to the kind of have things laid out roughly where I want them to be, I'm going to start coloring them in. Again, I'm going to worry about my color relationships. Oil pastels are really awesome in that they will blend very nicely with each other. So anywhere that you're kind of wanting to get a mixture of the two, you can easily just do that. But you can also just go over the top of other colors with them sometimes. That's not so true of something like white or yellow, because those are pretty weak when it comes to colors and competing with other ones. But so far as um, if you want to put a darker color over something else, that's pretty easy to do. And that's why I started with the light colors first, because I know I can come back and cover those up. Then you can see here on this flower, it's pretty pink. So I put in a little bit of pink, and then I come in there with white. And I kind of switch back and forth between what I'm doing, just because that feels comfortable. Trying to get a balance of everything throughout the work as I do it. And as I'm making it, I have kind of broad strokes. I don't take a lot of time in getting these details here. This is supposed to be sort of the reason they call themselves an impressionist is because it's supposed to be this thing right now, not something that took me a really long time to figure it out. But in this moment, I try to capture this work. Now, obviously, I'm copying somebody else's artwork that had already done that, but the style still holds true. And then once I've gotten that laid out, I'm now coming in with all those colors. I'm going to do a lot of blending. You'll see that I end up using my white oil pastel a decent amount. Um, I get the layout of where the kind of the flower, the glass that it's in, and um, the rough outline of that type of stuff before I go to the background, because I don't want to. The background is just going to be like an afterthought. That's not the subject of the work. I'm just going to kind of color that in roughly. You can see in this part, I do get slightly detailed in some areas just because I want it to be, I want I want it to look, like a flower. All right, so I'm taking care. I'm not just blobbing big splotches of color on there. I do have a little bit of control about where things are, but I'm not going overboard, and I'm not focusing too much on those really, really, really tiny details. It's more of the overall feel of what does this look like. So I'm feeling like I'm pretty good about how this is right now. So I'm going to go and move on to my background. I didn't want to get oil pastels all over my mat that I use because it actually can be pretty messy. So I took another piece of paper and laid it under there as I was working on the edges just to keep that up. And then I, went through this and just filled it all in with one solid color. And then after I filled it in with the complete color, you can see I leave some white spots and stuff around in there. I come back in with another a slightly different color and blend it together to make it give it that really painterly effect, almost like somebody was there with a brush. And you can see I actually go back in a separate direction. So I went side to side at first. Now I'm going top to bottom. That'll help fill in those things a little bit better. And those two colors I thought mixed together nicely and looked good with the flowers that I have in the front. So now I'm going to finish the bottom part of it, and that works almost the same as the top, just using a different color. Honestly, when I look closely at the painting, I can tell that as Renoir was finishing this up, he may have been running out of paint or something like that because the top was blended nicely and the bottom part looks kind of like it was just, oh, well, I filled this in with what I had. And sort of almost you can it's almost just like you can see the huge brush strokes they use just to fill it in as quickly as possible. I do copy Renoir and giving that almost reflection there on the thing to make it look like the wood was shiny, which I'm sure it was. Um, and I'm feeling pretty good about this. So this is my final piece, and I have a nice work of art to display. I can't wait to see what you do.